Hello, friends. This is Chandrakant from Akulmach Technologies, and today we would like to discuss about the kind of hardware, the kind of PC that is required nowadays, especially when everyone is getting into video conferencing. So, discuss further on this subject. Let me invite my friend from UK, Mr. Naval Gun.
Good morning, CK. Good morning, everybody. This is really an important subject for everybody to pick hold of today because COVID's still here. We're here for the long term, as everyone is now realizing. So if you haven't prepared already, now's the time to prepare. And it's so easy, as we're going to explain to you today.
Absolutely. In fact, before we start discussing, I think the biggest confusion is that people start using their laptops and then they start doing all sorts of things. And, sometimes it fails, sometimes things doesn't work, slow connection, etc. So to avoid all that, our recommendation would be to set up a video facility all by itself so that you don't interfere with your laptop and you set up a video setup which is useful for your video editing, for your conferencing. And if you're a gamer, you can do that, or simply streaming. So when we talk about the video arena, there are couple of things that comes to our mind, and that is the four primary activities that we indulge in. Either you are streaming or you're gaming, and you're also doing video editing. That means when you're actually creating a video, there are multiple elements that you're bringing in and stitching them together. And for doing this video editing, many times people use different sorts of very expensive applications like Adobe or OBS or something like that. There are different tools which are available for getting the videos prepared. It will have a sound element, etc. So for that, there is a separate hardware requirement. And then there is a normal conferencing, which is the easiest things to do in today's world. All you need is a Zoom connection or a Google Meet connection, and bingo, you're there. So these are the four criterias, and we thought we will discuss one by one. Any opinion you have, Naval? Something that I missed out?
No, I don't think so, CK. I mean, the thing is, you hit the nail on the head. What you need to do as an individual is decide where you sit. So if you're sitting in video conferencing, as we are today, it is literally plug and click. Everyone's done the work for you. You get a nice little dashboard, and off you go. And even if you can go into Zoom, you can create a free account, and you can even have a conversation with yourself without inviting anybody in. So you can go and play. And I think that's I'm not talking about gaming here, which is the one above it. You can go and play, go and enjoy yourself, go and feel comfortable with the video conferencing arena, because it is part of our life. And we need to accept that because it's part of our life, we need to be able to be comfortable with it. It's a bit like sitting in your own sofa or on your own private chair at home, and you've got your laptop in front of you, or as these people have got, they've got screens on the wall. I mean, these days I do an awful lot of video conferencing through the TV because it's got an internet connection. So just experiment. And I think this is the point. As we move further into these, we just need to go and experiment, have a bit of fun. Don't worry about it too much. Just become comfortable with it.
Absolutely. And all of these different aspects of video brings different type of requirement for your hardware. Say, for example, if you're doing gaming, then you really need a really powerful device with a lot of memory and bandwidth and multiple screens. And there are very serious gamers. So if you're thinking of becoming a gamer, then the hardware requirement will be of one type. And then if you're doing a lot of video editing, then you need a different sort of hardware, and streaming and so on. The whole point is how much funding you have for this project, for this build, is where the whole question lies. So we will discuss one by one what is available in the market, and then in the end we will also summarize all of it as a medium base PC which may be required. So the heart of the any PC or any system is the CPU, which is really the heart. And this is a main component, and it is the most expensive component that you will have on your video platform. Currently, there are two brands which are very popular. One is Intel, obviously, everybody knows about it, and then other is AMD, which some people know. And AMD is also coming up very fast, especially with regard to video arena. So Intel has been around since our childhood, since at least for me, I can talk about, not for Naval, but Intel was there even before I was born. In today's context, there are multiple types of Intel chips available, like Celeron, 3i, 5i, 7i, and now recently 9i. And all of these, especially the 5i onwards, are also called 10th generation Intel chips. So, to explain a little further, if you're looking at a video platform, I think the first thing you should do is ignore Celeron and 3i straight away, because these are the chips which will not work for you if you're thinking of either video conferencing using Zoom or some platform like that, because these chips are not designed to handle the heavy graphics which are involved in any video activity. But based on a budget, you can choose anything from 5i to 9i. 9i is really the most expensive chip. In fact, 9i can be 60% of the cost of your entire build. So if you have that kind of money, you can invest in 9i. And if you're a very serious gamer, you will have five monitors to see different activities running on your different game console. You can go in for 9i. But if you're a normal user, you can even choose a 5i 10th generation. And this would be sufficient for your normal activities. But if you're doing movie grade uh, video editing, then you would need 7i. So I would say anything depending on a budget, 5i or 7i, you can choose. If you're choosing the Intel stream of CPUs. Your opinion, Neville?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you're serious about this, then you really need to start at the 5i and the 7i level. And we haven't spoken about cost, but there's a significant difference between the Celeron and the 3i, and then the next level, the 10th generation 5i, 7i. So the main thing is to do a little bit of research about what you want to get out of your system, where you want to, how you want to enjoy it. Because the last thing you want to do is build all your hopes and expectations on a 9i type of platform, and then your budget only allows you to do 5i, because there's a significant difference in price, as CK knows. So the thing is about set your expectations at the realistic level and go after what you want to do.
Absolutely. So I think we would go ahead with 7i as a mediocre choice. But if you're really not doing too much of very complex video editing activities, and you don't have one of these Adobe or any of these advanced video editing tool, then you can also go ahead with 5i 10th generation, which is going to be sufficient for you. And ultimately, what these chips brings is basically processing power. So it really depends on processing power. But if you're a serious gamer and you want to future proof your investment, don't even look at 7i series. Just straight away go for 9i, and that is where you're basically going to invest in your gaming platform, and also future proof your investment for next 3 years. So this is on the Intel side, but let's look at the AMD, which is American Micro Devices. They are the second most popular CPUs, and their costs are much lower than Intel. So instead of choosing some of these Intel platforms, you can also look at AMD platforms, which are equally good. And recently, they have launched a new brand called Ryzen, and Ryzen is optimized for video editing type of activities. So now here you have a chip which is optimized for video streaming, editing, and the reviews are very good for AMD Ryzen. You can actually go for 7th generation Ryzen chip. instead of going for Intel. The cost may be even lesser. You can choose basically. So it's basically up to you how much fund you have, what you are comfortable with. Both options are available in the market. And I think you have to do a little bit of research, especially in this area, because the build of your PC will be determined mostly on the choice of the CPU that you're choosing right now.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of people have never heard of AMD, but the reality of life is that they are a serious player and considerably cheaper than Intel. So don't push them to one side because you've never heard of them. So just have a look at the comparatives, because there's a big user base out there now, and as we all know, users tend to tell the truth. They will. There's lots of platforms out there, and you'll hear that some people that were literally almost like Intel, no, you'll never get me off Intel, and now have become AMD users. So again, it's a question of, in some respects, what your budget can afford, what you want it to do, and how much fun you want to be having. But yes, I've heard a lot from Ryzen. We all and it came on the market relatively early, in many respects, earlier than I think they planned to put it out there. But what it meant was they've really got some great feedback very early. So if you're a serious gamer, it's the place to be, as they say.
Absolutely. So I think either choose 7i Intel platform, or you can choose Ryzen. Ryzen may be slightly lower cost, but I think the point has been made. Let's move on to the next important activity that we have to do while making this build. The second one is a graphic card, which we also call GPU, graphic processing unit. And there are many around. AMD has their own graphic card, and so is Intel. But the top of the line is Nvidia, and Nvidia has been around for many years, and they are the leaders. And I would recommend that just go with Nvidia. You don't have to choose AMD or Intel, because these are specialized producers, and they produce very, very good quality GPUs, or graphic processing unit. Now, why these GPUs are required? GPUs are required because of how fast the picture changes on your screen. If you're basically running a game, and then you try to shoot something, and then when you click on your shooting button, it does not show immediately. There is a lag of 1 second or so. So to avoid all that, you need a very good quality GPU. GPU comes with processing of the graphical elements which are running on your video. And that is why that is very critical, not only CPU, but also a GPU. And go with NVIDIA. I would recommend go with NVIDIA. Important thing here is how much memory you have on the GPU, which is your graphic card. And I would say that if you have 2 GB, then you can normally, do things like play your YouTube videos, um, MS Office, Excel, those kind of things. So if you look at the market, uh, the NVIDIA 2 GB GPUs comes with, in fact, every PC or every laptop that you see. This is basically the starting end of the GPUs. 99.9% PCs that you buy off the shelf comes with 2 GB GPUs. And for a video activity, these 2 GB GPUs are not at all sufficient. Anything of below 6 GB will not be sufficient, and that increases the cost. Now, if you have a 6 GB NVIDIA GPU, the cost of this board will be equal to cost of your CPU. So you have to keep in mind that if you're looking at building a station for your video activity, you rather invest in a proper graphic card. I'm not saying that you go into 8 GB, because 8 GB even going to be more expensive than the CPU itself from your Intel platform. So go with something which is reasonable. Go with NVIDIA, invest in 6 GB. You are going to future proof your investment for next 5 to 6 years by going with the right hardware. Your opinion, Neville?
You're absolutely right. And this is about future proofing as well. I mean, the last thing we want is, we do know that if you buy a PC off the shelf, or even if you create your own and get it made for you, it's obsolete almost as you picked it up, because there's other things that are going to be coming out. But so you need to, this is a big investment. So future proof it as much as you can. As CK says, 2 GB is pretty standard for everybody. A gamer will, a video, anyone working in video will not be very happy with 2 GB. So pitch it at the 4 to 6, but even so, these are really reasonably expensive. So again, it's a matching exercise between your CPU and your GPU. So you need to um, you need to balance it and see what you want to get out of it. And again, there are lots of reviews out there, so go and listen to the reviews. Go and listen to the big gamers out there, not the ones that are sponsored by. By the way, we're not sponsored by Nvidia here. This is just CK's personal preference. But don't just listen to people that are sponsored by these major players, because there are people that are sponsored by them, and all you'll see is them promoting those individuals. So go to someone that isn't sponsored by them. The ones that are going to tell you their truth, what it works for them.
Absolutely, Naval. In fact, we are talking from the heart, and we are talking in terms of giving the knowledge that we have got so far, and we are trying to optimize without, representing any brand here. So we are not saying that NVIDIA is something that you should go for. The point was that if NVIDIA is most popular, most easily available, most serviced, in case you have a problem, they will have a warranty. So go ahead with something which is already proven, and it works with all kinds of chip. If you choose a AMD chip, it will work with that. If you choose an Intel, it will work with that. For example, if you use a GPU from Intel, it may not work with many other things until unless they are Intel. So you are actually moving away from a proprietary kind of a thing. And if we follow some of these guidelines, you will be able to make a very low cost graphical graphics ready setup for yourself, and you can do many things with that. So moving on to the next important item is the memory. All kinds of memories are available. And when we say, in fact, if you remember, I said 10th generation CPU. The 10th generation CPU is nothing but the higher frequency at it works. So 10th generation can work at 4.2 megahertz. And if you don't have a corresponding memory to handle the CPU processing power, then your PC will not be scaling up. You may have a memory which cannot match the 10th generation CPU. So that is why you need to have a proper memory, and look for this word called DDR4. It's a technical word. I don't want to confuse the viewers, but simply follow this word called DDR4 and look for memory which works as 3200 mega 3200 megahertz. So this is the keyword for choosing your memory. I think whatever memory size you choose, but make sure your memory has this technical specification from whichever company. You can choose based on your price, but choose DDR4 working at 3200 megahertz. And that is going to blaze your PC to, and you can't imagine how much speed it will work at, and with your video with no latency at all. Now coming to the size of the memory, the starting point for any graphical activity is 8 GB. 8 GB is not really the best, but you can do small things. You can edit small videos. If you want to make one character run from one end to the other of the screen, you can still manage with 8 GB. And if you're smart and you're very creative, you can manage with 8 GB of memory in your PC. However, I would say go with 16 GB, because it's a question of future proofing, and you don't want to basically run into problem after 8 months or 1 year. Then again you need to upgrade your PC. So straight away go with 16 GB. Or if you have funds, because memory is not very expensive, the most expensive part of the build is the CPU and the GPU. Memory is not that expensive, so you can have few more bucks into it and go for 32 GB, because 32 GB is going to run with your PC for next 5 to 6 years, and it is going to blaze your PC even with more complex graphics.
That's excellent advice. And a couple of things here is, I don't have a very powerful PC because I'm not into the video gaming arena on my laptop. But I like to go to our designers, and when I sit with them, it's almost like sitting in a very fast car, because these things just shoot across the screen so fast, that if you blink, it doesn't matter, because you're still in the zone. It's a bit like being at a cinema. And the other thing I would say is, as you noticed, as CK said, the memory actually is relatively cheap. And it's so cheap that there are always, as you can see there are always 4 slots, and you can always add to the memory. So if you start off with a 16 GB, you can always add in another and turn it up. So this is the thing. To me, this is the plug and play arena. This is the most expandable part of your PC, and it's very easy to fit memory cards, isn't it, these days?
Oh yes, these are just the slot. You can do it yourself, and there are various shapes and kinds of memory. Uh, if you want to expand your memory even before 64 GB in future, you can actually go with 32 GB on single card. Like the cards that you see here, there are two cards here. One card can have 32 GB. So you can start your PC with just one card, and that would leave 4 slots empty, and then in future you can expand in case you are doing very high end gaming with multiple players, 100,000 viewers on the other side, and your Twitch stream is running and your other streams are running. You can expand it even beyond 64 GB. But I think in this video we are talking about what is the optimum. I am
Yep.
saying go with 32 GB to start with.
Excellent advice.
Now, the hard disk, which is the fourth element of any PC. Nowadays, you get the solid state drives, which are so thin. In fact, some of these drives are almost like memory chips. So they don't take too much space, like the earlier drive systems, which used to have a drum, as I'm showing this, which used to take a lot of space. So these solid state drives are very, very thin, and they contain their input output is also quite high, and they also contain a lot of information. So in my opinion, but these are expensive. These are slightly more expensive than the old style drive. So if you are doing graphics and you are doing gamer, your hard disk is going to basically fill up very quickly, and you need at least 1 TB or 2 TB. Now you can go for solid state drive of a terabyte, but it's going to be very expensive. So what I recommend is take a drive which has your OS and your graphical software loaded on it, so that you can use it and your current project which you're running on. So the input output for your current project should be on the solid state drive, and you can start with 256 GB solid state drive. It's going to be very low cost, less than $50 or so. But once the project is done, you need to still dump your work files. For that, in your PC, go with the standard old style uh, HDD, as we used to call them, 7200 RPM HDD. Go with 1 TB minimum. And the cost of this will be very, very low actually. We just put another drive to keep dumping your work, and use the SSD, which is solid state drive, for your activity, which is your live activity, either gaming or something like that. For storage, you need a hard disk. So I recommend go with two drives, one SSD, go with 256 GB. I think that should be sufficient, less than $50, and go with 1 TB old style hard drive. It will be less than $12. So I think that is going to be sufficient.
I think that's the way to go. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what I do. So, because here's my one, you can probably just see it's just a plug-in, so easily available. And again, I'm not a gamer, but I do have a lot of data, so I carry that around with me. And by the way, it's backed up, so that's another thing you need to remember: back it up. Otherwise, you never know where you're going to be.
Yeah. So interesting thing is, if you are setting up your own graphical desktop or station on which you want to do streaming, video editing, video conferencing, and gaming, I think this is what you should go for. And then in future, if you want to expand, you can have external drive, as Naval has said, for storage. But by default, I think you can go with 256 GB of SSD, solid state drive, and an old stride drive of 1 TB or 2 TB. The cost difference is hardly anything. If you want to put in another $1 or $2, you can go with 2 TB of storage. So moving on to the next important subject, which people don't even think about, is your
Oh,
power supply.
the power supply and the fans.
Right. So the power supply, you're having a Ryzen chip or a 7i 10th generation chip, which is going to be about 90 watts. It's going to generate a lot of heat. And then you have GPU with 6 GB and all of these hard drives, solid state drive is going to heat up. The chances are, if your PC is heated up to 60 degrees centigrade, it will stop working. So you have to have a proper power supply. And also in case of surge, so usually when you buy a standard ready-made PC, you will get a 500-watt power supply. It is sufficient, but I think since you're building your own by using these instructions, go for 650 watts. And there is no need to buy 850-watt power supply, but you can go in for slightly higher so that there is more resilience in the system that you're building.
Absolute right. Great advice. And a common area that people just ignore, sadly. But the last thing you want is insufficient power. I mean, fundamentally, if you're going into the high-end gaming, then you're going to be using up a lot of resources. So you need to make sure that the power source is right. And mainly, you need to make sure the power source is well sited, because these things will overheat. I mean, they'll work up to the full power source, and that fan will kick in and it will be working its guts out. But you never really want to get there. You only really want to get about 70 to 80% of the limit of the power supply. And that's why, as CK says, recommends take it up just one level. It's a few dollars extra, but it's a smart move.
Absolutely. And all of these devices that we have talked about will go on a motherboard. So you have to use a motherboard which is fine-tuned for gaming, because motherboard plays important part of creating different I/O buses from CPU to memory to hard disk, and GPU, and so on. So the connection should be optimum. The power supply should be able to bring cool air to all of these devices. So I think and important part is that the ports, which are important, because when you're doing video editing, very soon you start plugging in all sorts of external devices to your PC. You have USB cameras, you have mics, and you have the lights, and then you have auxiliary mic systems and auxiliary cameras. You have multiple cameras. Everything start going into your docking station of your video station. So you need to not ignore this point. You have to choose a right motherboard which will have HDMI connectivity. You will have multiple monitor support. You will have USB. You have Wi-Fi. All that is part of the motherboard. So all of these devices, which are really the heart of the PC, will go inside this motherboard. So choose a good quality gaming motherboard. I would recommend that.
Definitely, that's an absolute definitely. Because everything that CK has been saying so far sits on the motherboard. So you need to make sure that this thing is doing its job. And again, we're not suggesting MSI is what you should be going after, but go for a good motherboard. Don't skimp on this part. This is the thing that holds everything together.
Absolutely. So go for 4 USB outlets and at least 2 HDMI, because you may have connectivity with 2 monitors maybe more. So if you have to basically remember what you need in your docking station. So if you're looking at 3 monitors to be connected with your PC, then you go for 3 HDMI connectors and 2 Ethernet connectors, because if you have 1 Ethernet connectors and then If your PC has a lot of power, you can then create a local area network to drive some other devices. So go over 2 Ethernet, at least 2 HDMI and 4 USBs. So moving on, all of these things are really makes up your PC. And in the end, we will come to the box. You know, the box can make or break things. So you need to have a proper box with a lot of ventilation. And some time back, Naval made a point about one fan working out, but you should have such powerful machine. When you're having, you should have multiple fans running. So the box will provide places where you can put additional fans to cool off your high energy output machine that you're building here. So choose the right airy box. You can choose a simple one, as you can see in this one is just a rectangular cuboid box. It's going to work as good. Or you can choose very fancy, as it's shown here, which looks like a next generation, but really it doesn't make any meaning. It's just a show. All the point that I'm trying to make is, make sure that you choose the right box with a lot of ventilation and a lot of place for putting multiple fans. So you may need to put more fans to cool up your machine. So a box is suitable for it. Right. So moving on, I'm just going to summarize whatever we have said, which is the optimum PC that you can make for your graphical use, which is your video conferencing, your video editing, and your streaming. I think you can go in for 7i 10th generation or AMD Ryzen 7. You should go for NVIDIA 6 GB onboard memory GPU. Start with 16 GB RAM, but if you have little funds, if you have money with you, you actually go with 32 GB of RAM. That would that would be sufficient for you. Go with 256 GB of solid state drive and 1 TB of HDD, which works at 7,200 RPM. Go with 650 watts of power supply, and choose the right motherboard which will have multiple USB and HDMI ports, because HDMI ports are going to drive, because you need to connect your TV, you need to connect your monitor if you're doing all these high-end graphics. And if you don't have an appropriate monitor, you will not be able to see what you're doing, what you're designing, what you're planning. So you need a proper high-end 4K type of machines, monitors, which will require HDMI connection. So you need to have a right motherboard for it. And also a tower, a proper tower based on the form factor that you have in mind. Now, if you follow these guidelines, friends, you will be able to make a very nice, high, powerful PC with current technology and future proofing for up to 3 to 4 years in the cost of about $1,400 to $1,500, and for the Indian viewers, below 1 lakh rupees. And this is a very, very nominal price for running your command station, doing your gaming, doing your streaming, catering to 100,000 stream audience, and so on. I think this is a very, very low cost setup that you can do, and you can do it on your own. You don't have to really buy it. All you need to do is basically buy these components, assemble them together, and voila, you're up and running within 1 day. What are your thoughts, Neville?
Well, it's as you say, you can do it on your own, and you can be up and running in a day. I mean, I've not recently, but several years ago, I put my own towers together, and it would take me a matter of about 3 hours, because all of the components come, and you just literally click them in, put them together, and then once you turn everything on and it all works wonderfully, you can close the box up and never worry about it ever again. But the key thing is plan ahead, because the last thing you want to be doing is to saying, oh, I didn't have enough HDMI, or oh, I didn't have enough USBs, because it's cheaper to do it at the beginning than it is to go and retrofit. And that's the simple fact of life around anything you do. Think ahead, plan ahead, and create the system that is not just going to be right for you today, but think about what you might be doing in the future once the additional technology comes out. So it's just about planning ahead and doing it yourself, because it's easy enough.
Absolutely. So people can choose based on their price budget. They can choose what they want and follow these guidelines and build a PC for themselves in a DIY way of doing things. And I'm sure this is going to help them. So with this, I say thank you so much for guiding us, Neville, giving your valuable inputs, finding time to join this particular video.
My pleasure, CK. Go and have fun, everybody. Because if you can't have fun, you're not living.
Thank you, Neville, and we will catch up again tomorrow with something more interesting.
Exactly. Bye all.
Bye.